Hello everyone, how's it going? After a few technical issues, we are ready to begin. This is Jason from Stray Basilisk, back for our 28th, I believe. Let me check. Our 29th coding stream. Today, we're going to be making a clone of a game called Scorched Earth. Well, I always knew this as Tank. I don't know if that's a British thing. I imagine there were lots of different versions of this. We ran a poll on our Twitter. There was actually a tie, so we kind of asked in the Discord. And I think Mr. PhD in there broke the tie. So a tie between Scorched Earth clone and a rhythm music game, like a Guitar Hero style thing. Ultimately, Scorched Earth clone won. So that's what we're going to be trying to make today. We're going to try and make this whole thing from scratch, hopefully get done within 2 hours or so. We're going to use processing to do this, which is a nice little Java-based framework for doing graphics and interactive applications and stuff like that, which I really love, which is great for these little kind of throwaway one-off projects especially. Let's take a look at this screenshot. I think it pretty well exemplifies what the game is all about, and we can jump straight in, like really quickly this time, to how the heck we're gonna put something like this together. So the way the game works is that there's a kind of randomly generated terrain, and then based on the number of players, I think in most versions you could have between 2 and like some whatever 4 or 6 players. It will place these little tanks down on the terrain. I guess it probably like either always gives them like a flat space at the left and the right, or I think if you look in some of the other screenshots, you can kind of see that it's just given them little tiny flat platforms. So it takes a random terrain and just flattens off little places for them to go. So we're going to generate a terrain, we're going to plop these tanks down and make sure they have some flat land to sit on. And then basically all that happens is that you take turns aiming your little tank's gun. I think also selecting the power of the shot. So, you know, it's kind of like a golf game or something like that, where you either like hold the button down or something like that. If you've ever played Worms, it works just like that as well. Then your projectile gets launched, it follows some trajectory, and when it hits the ground it kind of blows up, and you can kind of see here like where the space may have been left by something getting blown up, for example. Yeah, so that's what we want to do. Also in the game there were several different types of projectiles you could choose from. It got really, really crazy, and some of them got just totally nuts and really out there. We'll probably start off just trying to implement one, you know, maybe add a bit of variation. I thought it might be nice to have like one regular shell which just does a big explosion, and another one which is like a cluster bomb where maybe it comes up and then at a certain point you can press space again or whatever it is and then kind of get little secondary things, kind of like the Worms cluster grenade. I think that could be fun. So if we can get that working for 2 players, yeah, I think that would work just great. I'm not 100% sure what happened if you got hit, like whether a direct hit would immediately take them out or whether they had health. Like could I like blow this up and then the tank like, you know, make a hole and then the tank like falls down into the hole? I'm not sure. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, I suppose. Oh yeah, also there was wind, so the wind would kind of change every round, so you couldn't just like dial in a shot perfectly every time. You would have to kind of adapt for the wind. I think we could do some cool graphical stuff to kind of represent the wind actually. So like in the previous stream, for example, we made our little snowfall simulation where we have these snowflakes falling and there's some like random wavy wind, but we could probably use something like this, like a particle system, as a way to indicate the actual like wind strength in our tanky Scorched Earth world as well. So maybe we'll add this layer as a way to like visualize the wind. Maybe we'll call that a stretch goal. We'll see how we do time wise. Yeah, I think we should kind of just get straight into it. So let's talk about first how we're going to generate this terrain. This is actually also something we've done something like in a previous stream. It's weird, we've done so many of these now that we're getting to the point that I could like reuse stuff, and I'm never sure about whether I should do that or not, or like work entirely from scratch. So what I will probably do is maybe refer back to some of the code, but I'll definitely go through line by line and take out only the bits we need and explain anything that's kind of unclear. So I'm just going to open up this previous example because it kind of will demonstrate in a way what we're trying to achieve. Where are we? Okay. So we made this kind of lunar lander game, and I'm pretty sure the terrain generation is going to be almost the same. Yeah, so we kind of had these flat platforms and this randomized terrain in between. I think we can use something very similar. It's another old school game. I'm going to get caught up and end up playing this for too long because it's actually kind of fun. There we go. That's how this game worked. Also, by the way, the terrain is like continuous from like one screen to the next. It actually kind of links up. I don't think we need to do that. But fundamentally, the way we generated this random terrain, I believe we can do the same thing. And all we did was use Perlin noise to generate this terrain for us. So we can just give it like an X coordinate, and it's going to give us a Y coordinate between 0 and 1. And we can tweak some parameters for like how smooth or how, you know, jagged and the kind of scaling of that terrain to make it feel right. But I pretty much think we can just use that. One thing it won't give us is like overhangs and outcrops. It's going to give us basically some kind of line that just like smoothly wiggles around in a very terrain-like fashion. But what it won't ever do is like give us these kind of overhanging shapes. That's just fundamentally not how it works. But it's going to give us something which will work pretty well for this game, I think. So maybe we start there? Why not? Okay. Another thing is that in the other demo that I just showed you, the terrain is actually a load of kind of line segments. So you can kind of see here, it's just like line pieces like that. But what I think I actually want to do, because our terrain in Scorched Earth is going to be destructible, I'm actually just going to write into a bitmap, like a texture, actually paint it in like a pixel art kind of terrain. Because we're going to be, you know, when explosions happen, we're going to be carving chunks out of it, so it's going to be easier to actually turn this into a texture and do some pixel manipulation rather than using a height map and drawing lines and polygons and stuff. So we want a chunky pixel art look, so something I often end up doing is doing like a scale factor. And 3 ends up looking quite good for some chunky pixel art. Let's say... Okay, so in processing we define a setup function, and the first thing you do in setup is create the size of your window. So what I'm going to do is create this at some kind of size I specify, so maybe width of 1000, height of, I don't know, let's call it 750. You can also specify a mode, and to use hardware acceleration I just always use this P3D mode, even if we're doing a purely 2D game. The next thing is to figure out given the width and height of the screen and our scale factor, I'm going to kind of store off in some variables the width and height of our world, because those will kind of actually be different. So what I'm going to do is say that world width is going to be, let me make this a float. It's going to be width, which is a nice built-in variable processing gives us, which corresponds to the width of the window, or 1000. So divided by scale. But what I want to do is, I think, round this up, because, you know, we don't want our world to have like a fractional number of pixels. If we choose something that doesn't divide neatly into 1000, which actually is the case here, you know, 999 might have been better. I mean, it divides into 3. Then we want, you know, if we have our, I'm sure this is like super obvious and I don't really need to explain this, but if our world is on a certain grid where we have pixels like this, but each one is actually kind of subdivided into 3 in terms of the actual screen resolution, then, you know, if our window ends here, then we want to still have this whole pixel be included in the world, so which is why we kind of round up. Otherwise we'd end up rounding down and our world would end here with this pixel, but we'd still have like 2/3 of a pixel, if you like, kind of left empty. So I'm just going to do this instead. And then I'm going to convert this to an integer, and I'll do the same for height. There's a height. Okay, then what I think I want to do is create a let's call it a scenery texture. And then I kind of want to populate this, so I'm going to make a little function here called generate scenery. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate column by column, right? So I'm going to go, we have our world like this. I'm going to go look at the first pixel and say, hey, Perlin noise, give me a value between 0 and 1, and let's kind of map 0 and 1 to the kind of height, you know, which is actually going to be between like 0 and whatever the height of our world is. And then that's going to give me a value. And then I'm going to fill in all the pixels kind of below that, like that. And then the next value, you know, maybe is up here. So I'm going to fill in the next column, and it's going to kind of fill in this pixely scenery for us, like that. So start at x equals 0. X is going to be less than world width. Okay. Let's actually allocate our image here as well. Same size as the entire world. I hope I'm allowed to do this. It's not often that I just allocate a p image like this. I would often do like a render target. I forget what it's called in processing, or I'd load an image from a file, but this should work. I think one thing we need to do is, since we're going to be fiddling with the textures directly, I'm going to load the pixels, and then when we're done, we shouldn't forget to date the pixels. So let's pick an altitude, so float going to be equal to noise. Okay, let's actually set some parameters to do with the scale of the noise. Also, I kind of feel like I want to call this terrain instead of scenery. Terrain feels more like something you actually move over, whereas scenery... Hey, Hamida, how's it going? Thanks so much for joining us. Yeah, if you didn't catch what we're doing, we're making a clone of Scorched Earth, which I know of as Tank. Maybe that's a UK thing, but it's this kind of physicsy game where you each have tanks and you kind of choose your angle and power and you fling projectiles at each other. And what we're doing now is trying to generate like a random basic terrain for us, and we're going to use Perlin noise to do this. So let's do a noise. Okay, yeah. I'm not sure where the tank version came from, but I feel like there were many versions of this game, right? So we're making one of those. So let's set our kind of scale. So if you've never used Perlin noise before, it's really great for creating these kind of wavy terrain-like patterns, but depending on, you kind of want to scale it so that you get the right level of detail, right? Like how densely packed should mountains and hills and valleys and stuff be. So we can tweak this after we see what kind of terrain it generates. So it's going to do x times noise scale. So this gives us a value between 0 and 1. So let's actually use processing's handy map function to say, hey, this value goes between 0 and 1, but we want it to be between 0 and world height. And we could even be a little bit more conservative and say like we don't want it to be like right off the top of the bottom of the screen, so we'll start at like 20% of the world height and go up to 80% of the world height. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's literally just a document. I chose these colors, by the way, because apparently they're the best for colorblind people to distinguish. Apparently these are pretty much the only pair of colors which are visible to people with most types of color blindness. I think that's why, like Rocket League, these are the team colors for that same reason. Yes, so we now pick a kind of altitude, and then what I want to do is, okay, so here we kind of determine the, and I don't know why I call it altitude. I feel like height makes perfect sense, except that's a reserved word, so okay, let's call it, okay, let's just go with altitude. Then I'm going to fill in pixels in the texture kind of up to this point. So I'm just going to say for, actually we want to start from, so actually 0 is at the top in terms of like OpenGL and processing, and this is like height down at the bottom. You know, pixel 0, 0 is the top left, unlike your mathematical axes, which kind of start moving in the kind of bottom left. So we're going to need to do something like, so that's the bottommost pixel. Y is going to be equal to something like this. We could also just do y equals y is less than 1. Okay, yeah, this feels more natural to me. Sorry, I just kind of wrote 2 for loops at the same time there. Okay, so then I can just say, let's define ourselves a terrain color. Which should be, I don't know, let's pick a nice greeny color. Just like 30, 180, 60, something like that. And then I can say, I can directly write into this pixel. So if you haven't done much graphics stuff, this is a handy dandy formula for, okay, so under the hood this image is stored as just a big long array of pixels. Steamhounds is not a solo development game. Thank you, awesome. I'm glad that people take an interest in Steamhounds. We have a little company and there are about half a dozen people working on Steamhounds, so we have a few artists and talented writers and other game dev people, so it's a small scale, like very indie project, but it's hopefully somewhat of a professional thing, I guess. So let's set this to the terrain color. So I think this will work. I am the only coder on Steamhounds though, so in that sense it's kind of solo developed. Let's generate our terrain, and then in the draw function, which processing will call for us each frame, I'm just going to draw that terrain image over the screen, and it should be sized appropriately, I believe. Ah, does not like that. Screw it, I'll lose the static stuff even though I feel like it should be there. Okay, well, we generated terrain nicely. One thing I forgot to do though is to actually apply the scale. And this is going to work, but it's going to look blurry because I just realized I forgot something else. Okay. So we can see, okay, Perlin Noise has generated some quite nice terrain for us. And I can keep running this. Is it seeded differently each time by processing, or will it give us the same thing? Okay, it's giving us somewhat different looking terrain. Yeah, awesome. I mean, this is probably just fine. Yeah, I mean, the parameters seem okay, right? For like the scale and the everything, I think we can probably go with this. Annoyingly, no, there is not a delta time in processing. So I'm actually gonna have to do that now probably. So I end up writing this little snippet all the time. Just give me a float. So there's a sister framework called P5JS, which is a JavaScript based thing, which does define a delta time, but you pretty much have to do it yourself. So you can tell I've written this many times, but okay, we just do this. It's slightly annoying, but it's kind of what we're working with. So we've got our terrain. This works quite nicely. Awesome. It's kind of high, like maybe it's a bit, so Perlin noise, it will generally be biased around the midpoint. So to give us a room, let's see what the actual game looks like. It kind of looks like this anyway. I just wondered if we should like shift it down to give us more sort of headroom for the projectiles to fly, but this seems okay. We'll go with this. Yeah, so one thing you may be able to see is that there is some blurry texture filtering scaling going on, but we want some nice crunchy pixel art, so we just need to change a setting, which again, another thing processing doesn't do, which it really should, is I don't think it exposes. Yeah, I guess they would. Like maybe it's nothing to be worried about. So I happen to know there is a way for us to turn off this texture filtering to get some chunky pixel art. I'm just going to do that here. So processing's built on top of OpenGL, and you know in OpenGL you could do this just fine, but processing doesn't expose this, so we need to reach into some nasty internal stuff to do this, but the effect should be that our terrain is crunchy and sharp. Awesome, looks good. I think the next thing is to place our tanks, so let's create a function like you know what, let's work on rendering a tank first. So I'm actually going to create a separate class for this. Yeah, I mean I'm okay with doing hacky things. I just put a comment. I'll maybe put, you know, to do. Just write that and then never come back to it and call it a day. That's been real about the life of a programmer, but you know. So what does our tank need to know? It needs a position. Let's give it a color. Let's create a constructor. Yeah. That's what I tell myself anyway. So let's figure out how to draw a tank. So a tank has a position, and I'm going to say the position is like its base. So we kind of want to draw it as like a boxy thing, like above that, or you know, maybe we could do a little polygon like that. That feels like a tank, I guess. Yeah, so let's look, how do we draw a polygon in processing? I think you do it with this begin shape and vertex dealy. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is how we do a custom shape. Awesome. This will be very handy. I am indeed. Yeah. So we're doing a little project. I mean, hopefully this will just be done in a couple of hours. We just want to do this on today's stream, but we're making a clone of this Scorched Earth tank game. That is the idea. But yeah, I hope hopefully this turns out well. So processing very kindly gives us these functions for drawing arbitrary shapes. What I'm going to do is, when I can use processing for these streams, I do. I've done a few things with P5.js, like web-based stuff. I've also done one or two projects. You know what? We've got time. I'm just going to go through the back catalog. We've done one or two projects in Unity, like we did this little Hearthstone inspired like card rendering thing. You know, so we have these heat haze effects and some glowy, glinty stuff. So I use Unity for this since it's more of a 3D shader thing. And personally, I do game dev in Unreal and Unity as well. But for these streams, it's little self-contained projects, which processing is just great for, really. So what I'm using here are these push matrix and pop matrix functions, which allow me to write my shape drawing as if my tank was centered around like 0, 0, but then like shift everything off to a different position, which is just a way more convenient way to do this. So I can just say translate something like this. Yeah, it's great. Like I prototype stuff in processing quite often, I would say. Okay, so we want to draw our tank, and if we're going for this shape, and if this is the origin, then I'm pretty much just going to hard code some points in. So I think it's going to be like -4, 0, -4, -2, -2, -3. Is this going to work? 2. I'm just kind of imagining in my head what this looks like. Which is not the most methodical way. Back in the day, we'd have got graph paper out and drawn this, but we can compile and test this pretty quickly, so I'm alright with this. Okay, 4. Oh no, that's wrong. -2, -3, 4, -2. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'll tweak these numbers. We're also scaling the entire canvas up by a factor of 3, because it's kind of pixelated, so it's going to... Yeah, I'm guessing, like, these numbers may be way out. Text 4, 0. Okay, let's just try... let's just test this actually. Down here somewhere. So... let's see how this goes. Yeah, that kind of looks like a tank base. It's the wrong color. We didn't apply the color. Is that too small? What do we think? I mean, normally these are quite small. It's supposed to be a small little target. Like if you look at the original game, they were really tiny actually. So I think we're kind of on a par. So I'm okay with that. If anything, it's a little like wide, not tall enough. Let's also do no stroke and fill color. There's no, I don't know why I'm fiddling with this. I can never resist fiddling with things. Is it asymmetrical? Did I do something weird there? Or was it just like a rounding? Okay, I'm okay with that. Let's just leave it like that for now. And now let's figure out how to... I think what I'll do is make like a place tank function, which is going to return me a tank. Let's call it spawn tank. Let's give it a color, and let's give it a, I guess, like an X position. And then kind of what I want to do, at the end of this, we're going to return a tank with a certain position and a color. We're going to need to figure out what that position is. But the other thing I'm going to do is carve out some of the ground. So, you know, if we want to place a tank here, I'm going to, let's say we want to place a tank at this sort of X coordinate, then I'm going to put the base there. It's, you know, it has a certain size, and then I'm just going to like chop off this bit of terrain and like move this bit of terrain up so that it has a perfectly flat base to sit on. Let's actually give this a, can I do something static? Yeah, you can't put static stuff inside classes, which is really annoying just because of the way processing works. So I'm just going to create another thing here. Okay. Actually, it was 6, wasn't it? And then I'm going to go minus tank size over 2. So we'll parameterize this a little bit at least. +1. -1. That's over 2. That's over 2. Just comment this out for now. Check I haven't broken the rendering. Okay, we have our little tank, that seems okay. So I think what I want to do is, okay. I'm going to, let's say, flatten terrain around the tank. So which ultimately is going to mean editing this image in some way. So let's take, so what this gives us is find the terrain height at the tank. Okay. So what I want to do is something like so we're going to fill it. We're going to fill below that point with the terrain color, and I'm going to fill above that point with like empty space. Okay, what's 0? Y is less than. Ah. Let's fill space with so it's just going to be a transparent pixel. Okay. So I think we can now say the position is going to be new p vector with the x and our altitude. Okay, I think this will do what we need. So now, rather than creating a tank out here, let's just for now have a couple of variables like this. And part of the setup, I'm going to say player A is equal to spawn a tank with an x coordinate of, I don't know, I'll just say 30 for the sake of testing. Let's make it red. Then player B, let's spawn it at world width minus 30, and let's make this another color. Yeah, now we should be able to say draw. Should be able to draw each of these, and if I've done this right, they should have their nice flat little platforms, and they should be placed in reasonable places. Ah, let's call this spawn X. That's not good. That should have been from, no, this should have been from spawn X minus tank size over 2 to X plus tank size over 2. Believe. Nope. It's not like that. Why is that? Has it picked a weird coordinate? Just throw on the debugger. Put my variables somewhere where you can see them. Okay. Ah, spawn X ended up in a weird place. Oh, okay, it's because I had the parameters the wrong way around, and colors are integers under the hood. So we got very confused there. Okay. I was trying to interpret a color as an X coordinate, which is not how colors or coordinates work. Okay, awesome. So it looks to me like we're seeing some kind of flat little platform at least underneath these tanks. So, okay, this is the starting point. So next I think we can play around with having them aim and fire, right? So let's give these tanks an aim angle. Equal to, I guess, pi over 2, which should be pointing straight up. So we've drawn this. Let's now draw a little line for its turret. So draw the body, and let's say draw a turret. Draw a turret. How you spell a turret? I think so. So this time I'm going to rotate by aim angle, and I'm just going to draw a line. So let's say stroke weight, or is it stroke width? No fill. And then where do we set the color? Oh, okay, it's like this, stroke color. Angle, let me just draw a line from 0, 0 to 10, 0. Bit random, but I think that will kind of do what we need. Nope. I mean, the turrets are huge. That looks kind of weird. Let's make this just one. And let's make them not quite so crazily long. Okay, that looks kind of like what we'd expect for this game. Maybe make it a tiny bit longer. It'd be slightly easier to tell where it's aiming. Okay. So that's the turret. Let's play around with some controls, maybe. Okay. I'm just thinking rather than... So processing gives you like a key pressed thing, which is called whenever a key is pressed, and then also a key released. But it doesn't give you a convenient, like, is a certain key being held? And I think actually that's how we're going to want to do a lot of stuff. So what I'm going to do is do my own tracking. Again, like the delta time thing, this is something I wish processing did for you, but you can create a little snippet to do this. So I think we can get a key code. Yes, so where are we? It's going to be an int, so I'm going to say, I'm going to do a hash set of int or integer held keys. Then all I'm going to do is, let's import that. That right. I'm just going to say there's also this weird coded thing. If key equals coded, then you can check for these special keys are called like coded keys. Other keys, it just gives you a character with like the letter. So how it worked. Yes. It's coded. I'm going to just say held keys dot add key code. Okay. And then when a key is released, I'm going to say held keys dot remove key code. So we've now got this little set which will track for us which keys are being held at any given moment in time. And now in our draw, I can do some control stuff. So let's do controls here and then rendering down here. So you can make this a little section. So at some point we're going to need to keep track of whose turn it is. And I think a way to do that is just like this, actually. So just do it like this. And then here I'm just going to do for tank in tanks. Draw the tank. And then I'm going to do like a active tank index, something like that. So then I can kind of forward the controls along to the tank who is currently active. So I could do something like aim the turret, and let's give it a delta amount. And I'm just going to say min angle is going to be a bit arbitrary. We'll see if this feels good or not. And max angle is going to be something like that. And then I can say aim angle equals clamp, aim angle plus delta between min angle and max angle. Is that not a thing? Is that not a thing in processing? No. Constrain, okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, that's exactly what I want. So we constrain that, and then all I'm going to do is say if keys contains right. Let's do tank. Ooh. Active tank is equal to that. Then I'm going to say active tank aim turret I don't know. We can tweak this rate. So then if it contains left, then we can subtract that. Let's see if this does anything, or if I've screwed something up totally. Okay. Then it's decreasing, which is correct to me. Okay. So actually it should be this. Okay. Yeah, it was just flipped left to right from what I expected. So I can now, I don't know if you can see this, but I am aiming this turret with left and right. This is a tad too slow, I think. So we can bump this up. Maybe that's okay. could always be really fancy and left shift, is that a thing? Something like this. So now we can hold shift for like a fine control. This was totally unnecessary for me to add at this stage, but I can resist. So if I just do left and right normally, it is kind of fast, but if I hold shift, then it's slow. Awesome. That gives us some control. Now let us think about spawning a projectile. Should probably have a... Can I access stuff in tank? How does this work? No. Let's give ourselves a spawn projectile function. Well, let's actually define a projectile first, that might help. Projectile, of course, needs a position. And velocity. We can give this other stuff later, but for now that seems okay. And let's spawn it with these. And then let's give it a something like this. And here we're going to say something like this. Does this add in place, or does this not add in place? Let's check. So, where are we? Okay, it does it in place. Cool. Which is kind of what we wanted. And let's also define a gravity. And let's just do that as a vector. Who knows if we ever want to do a crazy upside down funky gravity world. Which is just going to be 0 and I don't know. Pick a random number. We'll tweak that to see whatever feels good. My constants are not super well organized. We maybe sort those out. So this dot vel dot add. Oh, does molt work in place? It does. So let's actually change this to this, because we don't want this little calculation actually messing around with our velocity, and same for gravity here. We want to do a similar thing where we just multiply the gravity by the seconds, and I think this should give us something. Now let's draw, and I think all we need to do is just No fill. Stroke. Oh, let's give it. Do we give it a color? Okay, I'll just do a random color for now. Okay, just draw a point. That's not how this works, is it? We do it like this. So, call it 2. I think we'll only ever have one active projectile at a time, so that's going to make things a little bit easier. I'm just going to say if active projectile is not null, then we can update it. Update by delta seconds. And kind of similarly when we render stuff down here, if it exists, I'm going to draw it. Should I have the tank launch a projectile for us? Seems reasonable. Right, so I think what we need to do is the velocity is just going to be, we're going to take our aim angle and then just multiply it by this force. That should be fine. And then so we had our turret length being something, what was it, 7? And I think that's actually going to be important because we actually kind of want to spawn our projectile at the end of the turret, because otherwise, kind of by default, we're going to spawn it at the 0 point, which is here, and it's going to like maybe like immediately collide with the terrain the thing's on. It's easier if we spawn it at the very tip of the turret with its velocity, because that's going to alleviate problems, and we're not going to have weird visual stuff where it like we spawn it down here and it like doesn't quite line up with the turret because it already starts to like curve due to gravity or something. So let's figure out the spawn point as well. So that's the turret direction. Is that so? The spawn position is going to be we're going to take our position and we're going to add the end of the turret, which is the turret direction multiplied by the turret length, if that makes sense. So we take our position, we go the direction of the turret, we step forward by the length of the turret, and that's where we spawn. And then the spawn velocity is going to be something kind of similar, where we multiply the turret direction by the force, and then I think we can just say return new projectile with that position and velocity. You know, at this point we could pass in another thing, like if we want it to have the same color as us. Should we do that? Why not? I'm already doing it. So we can kind of inherit our color like that. Spawn at the turret tip. Now I think we can say else. If it's not coded, I can say if key is equal to space. This is the annoying way you have to check for space in processing, I believe. And I'm just going to say, let's grab the active tank. I can say active projectile is equal to dots launch projectile with a force. I don't know, I'm just going to hard code this for now. Which I guess should be, we call it a force, let's call it a speed, right? That's really what this is. So we should be launching at 40 pixels per second. Gravity is going to be like 10 pixels per second downwards, so it's going to, yeah, we'll see. Something's going to happen. Right. So there is our thing. Let's press space. And okay, I think I screwed something up with the angle because I actually did some weird flippy stuff. I think. Yeah, so I rotated it by negative the angle. So the initial angle should actually be negative of that. And then probably this gets flipped as well. Got my clockwise and anti-clockwise mixed up. Oh, okay. And I need to make sure that these are in proper bounds. Which I believe kind of seems to be. Okay. If I pick a reasonable angle and launch my projectile. Yeah! No impact, unfortunately. But we can only have one at a time, so I can't. We don't need to deal with pooling or recycling. We can just kind of work with it like this. So what we need to do is find out if the projectile has collided with the terrain at any point. So that's the basic physics. Collision detection. So I think all I'm going to do is say I'm just going to round our position to the nearest pixel. And then all I'm going to do is just read into the terrain image to figure out if the pixel is set or not, which means I do need to... You know what? This is only ever going to happen. There's only ever going to be one projectile, so I think I'm good to just actually do it within here. I figure we don't want to do this more times than is necessary, but since we only ever have one projectile, it's actually kind of relatively a safe place to do this. So all I'm going to do is, well, first of all, if we're out of bounds, we want to bail out. So if we're rounded X. Well, there's certain cases where we want to despawn ourselves, right? So let's create a little is dead thing here. So if we've gone off the left or right, or the bottom, then we should just despawn because there's no hope for us. If we've gone off the top, then we should kind of allow that because it may just be arcing off the top. So y is less than 0 or did, okay, let's say rounded x is greater than or equal to width, or rounded y is less than 0, or rounded y. No, this is okay actually, that means it's off the top. Or the rounded y is greater than or equal to the world height. Since y increases going downwards, that will mean it's totally out of bounds and we should despawn. So I'm just going to say is dead, it's true, and then bail out. I'll also do a little check here. Where we do nothing if we're dead. We can probably catch this in the outside code, but may as well be safe. So now we still want to do the check for if we're off the top of the screen, because we can't be checking pixels up there to see if we collided with them. So rounded y is less than 0. Then I'm just going to return now we can do our actual check. We know that we're within the bounds of the texture, and I can just say if terrain texture, if the pixels at x plus, or rather rounded x plus rounded y times width is equal to, what do we call it? Terrain color? Yep. Just going to print that out for now. Cool. Ultimately, we want to spawn a collision or notify the parent sort of game logic that we impacted, and spawn a collision then. Spawn an explosion. So hopefully we can now detect our demise. Boom. Awesome. Cool. Now we kind of need this whole explosion thing to happen. Yeah, right, we're getting there. So, how do these explosions work? 'Cause I'm thinking that there are a couple of phases to this, which is... So I think when I spawn an explosion, it's going to have like a location and a radius. So I'm going to give it a certain location. And then we're going to pick a radius around it. And then all we're going to do is we're going to set to air any pixel inside here, which will have the effect of, you know, moving our terrain, carving a hole out of our terrain. You know, so this would then all be filled in. And then what I'll probably do is also have like a visual effect. So maybe like an orangey yellow thing, which kind of blows up and then like shrinks back down or something. So I think I'll make it a class for this. Let's give it a position, radius, and so I want there to be like a timing related aspect to this. So let's do my favorite from scratch. Let me open up the archive again. So I really liked this one, Solar System Simulation. So you could kind of place these objects and then place a rocket ship there, and it would predict the path, like Kerbal Space Program kind of style. So you could create these really neat little simulations. You even had planets like smashing into each other and stuff. So this was really nice. I like the visual ones. Like, I'm always looking for ideas which will be cool, like visual things. We did this water and sand, which was pretty cool. This was really, really fun just to play around with, and very nostalgic for me from like 80s and 90s DOS games. So that was good. Like, yeah, I like it when there's a really simple algorithm at the core of it, but it creates a cool little toy. What else have we done? We've done fractal rendering. The chess thing we did was kind of cool. Whereby people in the chat. Yeah, I mean, it looks kind of impressive, but it's really just the same. It's actually the exact same code, basically, that we did with our projectile. Like, it's just this, basically. The prediction's a bit more fancy, but all that is like running the update several times and then sort of undoing it, which is a bit fiddly to do the bookkeeping with, but the code-wise it's fine. This was nice. Like, we had this chess thing, which actually I think I can still throw into my stream if it was... No, it's not running. Okay. But this would like watch the chat and allow people to play chess over the chat. This took like 4 streams to put together, so that's kind of a major project. What else? Last week's was actually kind of fun, like this snowfall thing, where we had these little particles and they would kind of gather and stack up on the ground here. A lot of these are starting to overlap now, like what we're doing with the terrain explosions in a minute is going to be kind of similar to how some of this stuff works. No, they were all really fun. Metaball lava lamp was kind of cool, and I was super pleased with the fact that this ended up being like a seamless loop. So we did this one in Unity with some basic like shader code. Yeah, it's really hard to pick a favorite one. Like the more visual ones were more fun, I think. Yeah, I couldn't pick. It's like choosing between my children, you know. Okay, so when we create an explosion, let's give these a... Yeah, I mean, I want... The reason I do a separate... I tried to do this from scratch is so that somebody just dropping into the stream doesn't have to get really lost about what's going on. So I always aim to do something, yeah, like entirely from scratch each week. So I try not to reuse code, but the concepts, you know, there's only so many concepts. I've done like almost 30 of these now, so a lot of the basic concepts start crossing over, so I'll sometimes refer back to previous streams, and I still want to go through and write every line of code each time. And I also try not to use too many libraries or fancy things. I really want to have people see how fundamentally these things work under the hood. So if they're using a library like Unity, which makes it really easy to do these things, they kind of have some idea of what's actually happening. The code does end up being kind of disorganized and hacky, but I allow myself to do that, I suppose. So what I want to do is keep track of how long this has been alive, because it's going to be used for like animation purposes. So radius. So let's give this an update. Let's also give this an is dead. If anyone has any suggestions, I'm very, very open to new projects to try. So how do we draw this? I think what I want to do is something like... I kind of want to have, if you imagine a graph of like the size of this thing, I want to have it start at 0 and then maybe fill out that radius and then come back down, so it kind of explodes and then shrinks. So we can probably just do that with like a sine wave. So sine has this exact pattern actually, so let's say animation progress is, we're going to map the time elapsed, which goes from 0 to duration seconds, from 0 to 1. It's a kind of a overkill to use map here, but I think it's okay. So current radius is just going to be the ultimate radius times the sine of this, right? And then let's just draw an ellipse at pos.x and pos.y. It's going to be current radius times 2 by current radius times 2. Draw it centered. Let's do no stroke and fill. Well, this kind of color, right? Yeah, this is way this is way overkill. Okay, I'm just gonna do what felt right all along, which is just to do that. Okay, so the question is, how do we keep track of this? So I could just do something like this and say you know what, I'm going to do this for now because I think at a certain point, if I make a little cluster bomb, then we're going to have multiple explosions and we'll need to refactor this. So I'll do it the quick and dirty, horrible way for now, and then we'll refactor it when it needs to be done. Then all I'm going to do is, in the projectile, I'm going to spawn the explosion here, which I don't like really doing. It feels a bit wrong, but since I'm doing it just by setting this global variable, I'm sorry, 20, I don't know. So okay, that was cool. That kind of looked exactly how I hoped it would. Cool. The one last thing is, I think what I want to do is actually have it carve out the terrain, right? So I think what I'm going to do is, when it gets to the peak, its maximum size. So right now it's drawn on top of the terrain, so you can't see the terrain underneath it, but when it gets to the maximum size, at that point I'm going to carve the circle in the terrain, so when it shrinks back it will leave the hole kind of behind it. So what I'll have is is it's triggered, I'll call it. And what I'll say is if animation progress is greater than or equal to 0.5 and we're not yet triggered, then I'm going to carve out terrain. Carve out the terrain and make sure we set is triggered to true afterwards. And I will do this in a kind of similar fashion to this. So you know what, let's actually create an air color, just so I don't have all these magic numbers floating around for colors. So when we do something here with it, or is it air color, make things a bit more readable what the intent is. So when we do this, when we cut this out, we're going to want to, I think we're going to basically want to iterate over all the pixels in a box around it. It's going to be the easiest way to do it. And we can find the leftmost X based on just the position minus the radius and so on. We can find these bounds easily enough and then go through each pixel and check the distance of, say, this pixel to the middle. And if it's within the radius, then we set it to air, otherwise we do nothing. So that should hopefully work for us. So get rid of this now. Now, where do we do the carving? We do here. So let's say left X is going to be, can't be any less than 0, right? And X minus radius. Okay. Then right X. Yeah, thank you. Like that's the idea behind these, right? Like talking through everything, and I know my drawings don't always make total sense, but you know, I haven't planned this, right? Like I've maybe thought a little bit through the week. In fact, the poll was only finished earlier today, so this is my actual thought process, and it is kind of hard and slower to explain all this stuff, but hopefully this helps people. If anyone has any questions or wants me to go into anything in more detail, then I'm entirely happy to do that. That's one, and plus radius. So all this is doing is making sure that we take the position minus the radius, but we don't want to be off the left-hand side of the world. We don't want to iterate over those pixels at all, so just use this to kind of constrain ourselves. I could have used constrain between 0 and world width -1, but it's kind of only a one-directional constraining we want to do here, so I think this is okay. And now I can do top Y is going to be, yep, it's going to be the low number, and then bottom Y it's going to be Y plus radius. Okay, so now I can go equals left X, X is less than or equal to right X, plus X. Similarly for Y. So Y is going to start at the top Y. Y is going to be less than or equal to bottom Y plus Y. So now we're sort of iterating over the box which contains this thing. Oh, this could have been bad. The code to spawn an explosion was inside an explosion. That would have caused issues. So what we now want to do with the squared distance is equal to dot. You know what? Okay, so new p vector x plus x minus believe that's right. So I'm going to say if dist squared is less than radius times radius. So basically I'm just, because it's more efficient to get the squared length of a vector, I'm just comparing the squared distance from our sort of center point of the explosion against the square of the radius, just because it's a bit cheaper than calculating the actual length and the actual radius. If this is true, then terrain texture pixels x plus y times terrain texture dot width is going to be equal to air color. So when we reach the halfway point of this animation, when the explosion's at its full width, then we carve out all the pixels behind it, so when it shrinks we should see the gap appear underneath. Let us see. Fingers crossed this doesn't horribly crash everything. Oh yeah, come on. This is great. This is fun already. That's pretty effective. I can just smash the terrain right next to me. Success. Yeah, this is it. So I guess one question is, how do we handle this situation? The simple way is just to say if you get a direct hit, then you lose. Or the way more complex way is to give the tanks health and then have them like fall down. Yeah, what do we go with? I think let's make the tanks fall. Screw it. It seems like fun. So, which means we probably want to give it an update. Yeah, exactly. Raycast down. So, in fact, what I'll probably do is just every frame have the tank check every pixel immediately along its base, and if those are empty, it will just move down one pixel like that frame. I think that's probably plenty to make this work. So if there is no ground beneath us, fall down one pixel. Also means we don't need to do too many checks each frame. So I think all I need to do is for int x is equal to pos.x minus tank size over 2. X is greater than equal to pos.x plus tank size over 2 plus x. Now, I think we should probably check that this is also within bounds of the screen, but since the tanks never move left to right, it's probably actually okay. So let's say boolean false. I'm just going to say if terrain texture dot pixels at x plus pos dot y times terrain texture dot width. I'm going kind of fast today, so apologies if it's a little bit hard to follow, but so as soon as we find some terrain, we're going to say ground exists equals true, and break. So a tiny little pixel will keep us suspended, which I think is generally how these games would work. And then all I'm going to do is say if there's no ground, then dot y x equals 1. Let's give these some health. Okay, and then I can also say something like if you know what, I should probably do something like if pos.y is greater than or equal to world height, then we should just die. And we shouldn't do this kind of check. If we are dead. Okay. Y equals 1. Okay, I think this will do what we need. I'm mostly avoiding crashes. I don't want to run this code if we're already off the bottom of the screen. It's kind of a roundabout way of doing bounds checks. Okay. Let's, I don't know, shoot straight up, see where this gets us. Oh, we're never updating the tank, are we? Where are we? The one downside of doing this one pixel at a time is that we can't have the falling speed be actually based on physics, but seems reasonable still. It's simpler, I mean. Okay, let's try and get like a glancing blow. This is cool, right? I guess the goal could be to get your teammate just off the bottom of the screen. Maybe that's it. Okay. So I think a couple more things. First is some kind of game state. I think we're going to need something like that. So aiming. Have I ever done that? I think it depends on the thing you're iterating over, right? So this tanks is an array, so I'm almost 100% certain that for each over this is going to compile down to exactly the same code as a regular for loop. On the other hand, if you're iterating over like a dictionary or a set, you know, something like this, then probably under the hood it's creating like an iterator object and then calling next on it, so it's technically like allocating memory for stuff. So there are times, like I've done some, so Steamhound is actually also built in Java, and there are issues with garbage collection in Java. So, you know, basically what happens is, as a Java app's running, you can have a graph over time of the amount of stuff in the memory being used. And as you create more and more objects, you create more and more memory. At a certain point, Java goes, okay, you've hit some limit. I'm going to now take a little fraction of a second to like clear up all the useless stuff. So it normally drops down like that, and then it will increase again, and then drop down again. So you get this like sawtooth. But in a game in particular, when this happens, there is a little bit of time when this cleanup is happening, and it can cause like frame rate hitches and audio hitches and stuff like that. So in anything other than a game, I would say it almost never matters. In a game that's not super simple, sometimes you might care about this. So the reason to worry about the loop is not that it's slower, it's that it creates temporary objects like iterator objects, which cause garbage. So what you really want to do is have, in the context of a game, you want this garbage to build up really, 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 really slowly. So if we look through the code, there are cases where temporary objects will have been created. So for example, when the explosion happens, when I'm figuring out which pixels to kind of carve out of the terrain, for each pixel I'm creating this vector just for the convenience of using this function on it. What I'm actually doing is just calculating a distance. So I could have done this with like, you know, just some variables without creating a new object. So it's basically this, which is something I would maybe look to optimize doing, like creating temporary vectors and temporary like color objects and stuff like that tends to be the performance culprit. Other than that, I will always use for each if I can. What I really like are languages which let you get the index and do for each at the same time. Like sometimes you want to do something like this because you need the I for something else in here. And what I like about like Python or Go is you can do a for each and get the variable out. You know, it's more like something like this, so you can get both things at the same time. So that's really nice. No, but I don't think it's a concern. Another thing which probably isn't a concern is this. I will generally use ++x instead of x++. The reason being is that if you think about how these works, right? So let's say you have is equal to ++var and int var 3 is equal to var++. So what this does is it sort of increments variable and then writes the result back into this, right? So the result ends up being 2. Whereas with this, it increments after the line runs, sort of. So this is still 2, but then var is 3 at the end. Yeah. But like, so conceptually, this is less efficient because it needs to create a temporary thing to remember the value before it was incremented. Whereas with this, it just increments it and there's no like keeping track of the version prior and after incrementing. So like in theory, if the compiler didn't optimize at all, then this I think would be more efficient. Whereas because this would create like a temporary thing and then throw it away. But yeah, in practice, I would be astonished if these didn't compile to the exact same thing. But I write this out of habit. Yeah, but I think this is just not a real practical issue at all. And you know, with any performance thing, you should really just measure and see which bits of code are running slow before you really dig into things like, you know, using a different kind of loop. It's just not, that's like a last resort, I think. So we were thinking about having different game states, so aiming I'll just call it like aiming and resolving. And I can say something like, let's start as aiming. It's old school, right? Like maybe in some old school version of C or whatever like that, it really mattered. I mean, I kind of do it because I feel like it's closer to what I intend. Like I don't, if I put x++, it kind of implies to me that I want to use the value prior to incrementing it for something. So because I don't, I write it this way, but yeah, it's just, if anyone tells you you're doing it wrong, I just think they've got their priorities like not very straight, if that's the case. Yeah, so I wanted to only do some of this stuff if we're in like this aiming state, right? And then what I would probably want to do is say something like if state is equal to dot. Okay, so first of all, when we press space, we want to go to this state. State resolving. So if the state is resolving and our active projectile is dead and active explosion null or active explosion is dead. A bit of a messy condition, but again, if we add more explosions, this will get more complicated. So, right, what this means is we were in this resolving, like waiting for the trajectory explosion to resolve, but the projectile's dead, there's no explosion, or the explosion's dead, then we can kind of move back over to was dot aiming. We can say active projectile is null. We can say active explosion is null, and we can do active tank index is equal to active tank index +1 modulus by I always forget if it's length or size. Okay, so you know, so I think this will give us the turn order stuff, and it will mean we can't aim like while stuff is in the air. So let's see that. So I'm going to take a shot. I'm going to try aiming. It's not working. Oh, that's bad. Code's becoming a little spaghettified, but I will forgive myself. This is just for fun after all. Okay, now I'm controlling pink tank. Now the red tank again. Awesome. So let's have a few more minutes to add a couple little things to this. One is that sometimes the little tank thing like sticks out at the bottom, so I can just make that a little bit smaller. I can also need to do something with how the power level works, right? So normally you will, I think I'll do it so you'll hold space and there'll be like a power bar which will go up, and then when you release space it's gonna launch it at whatever that power is. So let's do something like I guess it should, if you keep holding it, it should either launch it when it gets to the max. Okay, yeah, okay, let's do it that way. So um 0. So what I'll do is so aiming, let's have aiming, let's call it aim, power, resolve. I don't know. Start at aim. So now rather than immediately doing this, I'm going to say something like state dot power and then launch power. Is equal to 0. And now let's say key released, and I can say else if state is equal to, that's not right, state dot power and key equal to space. Now we launch it, right? So let's do say 100 seems reasonable. I'm going to say launch power times max launch speed. Okay, that should work. And now the only other thing we need to do is when we update, let's do a little switch here actually. Case aim, there's nothing really to do. Case, you know what, let's move these in here. If we're aiming, then let's do this. Case power, I'm going to say launch power plus equal, let's give us another constant here. Let's say something like delta seconds divided by. Alright, so this should mean that if we hold it down for 2 seconds in this case, then the power's going to reach 1. So I'm going to say if launch power is greater than 1F, I'm going to factor this out somewhere else. Void launch projectile. Which means that if we let go of space, then we're going to launch the projectile. And also if we hold for too long, then we're going to launch the projectile as well. We should probably break here. Now we can clean this up slightly. Okay, a little refactor makes me feel I can sleep slightly better at night. Okay. So we know the state's resolving. So, okay, this is a bit nicer. Let's just say for next player's turn. That's a bit more self-explanatory, and I'm going to... Actually, this should kind of just happen in resolve, right? That's nice. So the tanks always update because they may need to like fall. In fact, this only needs to happen in the resolve state as well, I believe. No, I guess they could fall after the keep falling after the explosion's finished, so let's push them up there. Okay. Seems a bit cleaner. So, I need some visualization of this, I think. Let's just do something like so I'm going to want to draw some like UI stuff, so I actually want this scaled. Actually, no, I think I could manage. Okay, I can manage. Okay, so let's say UI. So I'm just going to say if state is equal to dot power, then I'm going to draw a little bar. So from no stroke, fill, bit of a random color again. So I'm going to draw a rectangle from 0, 0 to world width times launch power, and I don't know, just 3. So this is going to draw a bar, hopefully across the top of the screen, which kind of shows how charged up this thing is. So let's actually even, so we could even do something like stroke this, no fill, so should hopefully see something. Okay. Where's it going? Oh, come on, not bad. Okay. So now we have a little power thing, so I can do a weak shot. Probably ill-advised. Or I can do hold the button down all the way, and it should just auto fire when it fills up. Boom. I know, right? That was Pilatus' finger in the air estimation. Okay. Let's try and nail this guy. Kind of terrible. Okay, the feel of the game is there. Yeah, they do feel floaty. Probably, yeah, it's a little bit too much, so probably I would just increase gravity and increase the launch speed kind of correspondingly. So, see how this feels. I feel like you want a bit of airtime for the like anticipation, but yeah, this is a bit better. Not bad, not bad. So I think maybe, okay, last thing I'm gonna do. No, wait. Oh, okay, I'll add wind. I'll add wind. Actually, no, I will let you choose. Option 1, do I add wind with some little particles in the background to kind of show the wind direction, or do I add the ability to toggle between different weapons and have like a... Yeah, I see what you mean, yeah. I try and avoid feature creep as long as it's like sort of complete and playable. Okay, yeah, so I can add wind or I can add a cluster bomb. Cool. Thanks so much for the follow, Mylan, and thanks for tuning in. I will hopefully see you on a future coding stream. Okay, wind. Let's do it. So, I think all I... okay, we can have an actual like wind vector, right? So let's just give it a... something like a max wind speed. Which is going to be pretty, like relatively low, I guess. And let's say... God, this stuff's a bit of a mess. Okay, so... let's just call it wind. Let's give ourselves a little change wind function. And I guess to keep it simple, I can say cause random 2D. We just get a random, I believe this gives us a unit vector. And then I'm going to say speed is equal to random between 0 and max wind speed. And then wind is just going to be okay, so this, we talked about allocations. This is another case where probably a cleaner way would be to do this. Yeah. This would have been cleaner, but an issue here is that this is a vector, and then this will basically create a new vector. So an optimization you might do to reduce the number of allocations is to do it this way. Oh. Ah. Which will modify this direction vector in place. It's kind of hacky because it's now no longer a direction, right? It's actually the full wind speed. So we need to be careful to not use it as if it was a direction in like subsequent lines of code. So I would say this is a hack that you shouldn't do unless it's as an optimization, because it's, by calling it direction, you've kind of implied it's a unit direction vector, but now it's not anymore. But you've avoided allocating another vector, so it's kind of nice in that sense. You know, another way to avoid allocation even more is to pre-allocate wind. Like that, and then just actually like update it, or there's probably even like a set. Right, but we're not going to do that. But these are the things you do end up doing if you really want to reduce allocations. It's really hard in Java to not allocate a crap ton of little temporary vectors and stuff, because you just can't create them in a way that doesn't create garbage. Like in other languages, you could create them on the stack, but everything in Java is on the heap, so everything creates garbage, and it's can be a pain because the code to work around it gets really, really hacky. Hey, IO Dinosaur, thanks so much for the follow, much appreciated. So, okay, we now have this wind vector. We probably want to have the projectiles follow it, which should be kind of easy. Like, there we go, right? That's kind of it. So, what I think I will do is add a new tab called it's called wind particle system. And what I will do is just give this Game Anglia. Wow, wow, that was a long time ago now. It probably was. We were there. We were at Game Anglia. Were you showing your own game there as well? Yeah, I really miss going to like live events. Obviously, it's been a whole year more or less since we've been able to do that. I think the last one was back in April last year that I went to. Cool. No, awesome. That's great. I'm glad you remember it. So are you a student? I know there are a lot of people attending were like game dev students at the uni there. So what I'm going to do, wind particle system. Get particle count. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Can you talk about what you're working on now, or are you NDA'd up the wazoo? I can't even mention it. That's cool though. Just thinking about how I want to do this. I'm going to bite the bullet and create a class for this. That's cool. That's cool. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I was a back-end dev. I pretty much still am a back-end dev. Like, that still pays most of my bills. So I feel you on that one. What are you using? Like, language, tech-wise, or is it a kind of a mix? So... let's create these for... equals... between 0 and the world width. Haha, yes! If you check back in the chat, yeah, we had... yeah, we had a whole thing. I think we had a very... it was a very, for these sort of religious programming debates, it was a very civil, respectful discussion, I felt. Okay, let's do... Very controversial. I mean, I'd never use ++i or i++ in a context where it would actually, the difference would actually matter, right? Like it's almost a rule to myself. Okay, maybe I would do that actually, but I never use it in an expression where it would be confusing or ambiguous, right? Like I've done these coding tests that you sometimes get for job interviews, and it's some big expression with like ++x's and x++'s, and it asks you what the final value would be. I just never ever write expressions like that. Like the only time I would use it, I pretty much do it on its own line, or maybe in a context like this, I would, if I didn't already have a loop, I would do something like this for like just updating an index in line like that, but I'd never use expressions. I just write it out. I just increment it on the following line if I want to increment it. I feel like that's quite sensible. Okay, so all I need to do is particles. Nope. Yeah, let's give them their own update function. What I really wanted was just a struct that I could have in an array here, but Java doesn't really like you doing that, so may as well embrace objects and make it its own class. So, in fact, it's going to be the same logic as this, more or less. Let's... I don't know if we want gravity to affect them, or for it just to show the wind. So maybe I will ditch gravity for now. And I'm going to say if x is less than 0, or it's not. Actually, I don't need this, do I? X is greater than or equal to world width, or basically I'm going to have it reposition itself. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think those are the best kinds of tests, like the take home, build something for us. Even better if they like pay for your time while you're doing that, but maybe that's a bit too wishful thinking. But yeah, I think those are way better than those really dry trivia type coding interviews. Yeah, like a take home thing is good. So if we're out of bounds, it's going to respawn elsewhere, so bit of code duplication, but okay, let's just do. Let's be good coding citizens and do this, and then I can at least feels a bit nicer. Update like that, and then let's give it a draw. Screw it, let's go full OOP on this as well. And kind of like the projectile. Use something very similar. Stroke. What's a color? What color indicates a wind? Yeah, like some Fibonacci. Some. Again, it's just a kind of test. I mean, I think people should be able to write those probably. Like, I don't think those coding interview questions are necessarily the worst ever. Cyan, yeah, that feels right. I feel like okay, it's bad depending on how they evaluate you, right? Like these trivia type you know, hacker rank type questions are okay if they evaluate you in the right way and they're really talking to you as you do it and seeing how you think about it and how you explain it. If they're literally just testing whether you can like read off the solution, I feel like that's not a good test. But it can be okay, I think, if the interviewer is like knows how to interpret the results. So maybe like this. So like 170, 200, 220. 70, 200. Yeah, absolutely. Like when I interview people, I like to see projects they've done and just talk to them about one of their projects and just get into some details to the point where they're teaching me about some aspect of their project, about the technology or some math or algorithm thing that I don't really know about. And I feel like that's when I really get a sense of, could I work with this person? Like, can they explain things to somebody in a good way? Do they really understand their own code? So I kind of like to do that where possible. Okay, so it's not a particle, it's a wind particle. And we do them like this. And now we should create this particle system. Code is a bit of a mess. Oh, we shouldn't do this yet because we haven't determined the size of the world, so the constructor is going to fail. Let's create it here. Let's say 200 particles, see how that feels. Now wind particles.update. And I'm going to draw them. Oh, okay. So I should fill the background first. And then I should draw them before the terrain. Because I kind of want them to just be on a layer like behind, and they're not going to interact with the terrain at all. So first of all, they're appearing on top, which is kind of weird to me. Maybe it's my mode, and I don't want to bother with depth. Actually, okay, let me... Let's actually pull this out. I think an issue is our image did not have alpha, it actually had a black background, which is being smushed on top of our wind. It also means I can factor this out just like this. Like that, and then I can use the same code when we generate the terrain. Okay. Hopefully that gives us now a transparent background. Nope. What's going on? Does it not have an alpha channel maybe? Let's just ditch this for a second. Okay. I think maybe I'm creating an image without a... do not use the constructor. Okay. So will this let me specify if it has alpha channel? Okay, cool. Yeah, RGB. So what I should actually be doing here is, when I generate the terrain, I should say is create image. Nope. Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay. So now hopefully our terrain, just realize it's not going to get drawn. They look like stars, right? Yeah. So I should probably make the background a different color. Let's... Hang on, did that work? Yes, okay. So let's make the sky, I guess, blue, like a bluer blue. D1, 180, 230. Gothic Death Eater, welcome back. Cats hate being flipped off. Is that true? Okay, so I always heard that if you look at a cat and you kind of slowly close your eyes and look to one side, that's some kind of signal of like being non-threatening. So maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know. There's also the whole thing of how you like approach an animal to pet it, right? Like whether like you offer it the back of your hand and let it nuzzle it before you reach for the top of the head. Maybe it's if you flip it off, you're approaching it in an aggressive way. I don't know. Okay, this sky looks absolutely horrible, so I'm gonna make it darker. Very arbitrarily. Is that actually true? Okay, yeah, I don't really know where that came from, but I'd always heard that. I think the issue may be that we never made the wind change, so actually when do this, should change the wind, but we should also change the wind at the very start of the game. Yeah, I feel like I've watched it or read it on one of these random... I may have been, you know, pre-YouTube era on some top 100 animal facts GeoCities page, who knows. Okay, are we passing everything on properly? So we're updating. We are doing this. We are drawing it, hopefully at the right place. Yeah, that's right. I'm probably missing something in the... Okay, let's just debug this. Continue. Okay, wind particles update. Step into the debugger is not very nice here. See what the wind is. Okay, so the wind is a legit vector, it seems. Step. So val. Okay, it has a velocity. We then update the position. Hey Simon, this is processing, which is it's not so much an engine, but it's a little framework based on Java. There's also a JavaScript version called P5.js, which is specifically designed to be very accessible and make it quick and easy to get graphics and interactive stuff up on the screen like as quickly as possible with as minimal code as possible. And I really love it. So it's not really suitable for big projects, but for... Yeah, it's processing. Yeah. Yeah, it's not super suitable for big projects, but for small little throwaway things, it's really great. So I use it for prototyping and these little, you know, weekend projects and stuff quite often. So we're updating the position. We are... What else is going on here? Where are we? Oh. Position is probably out of bounds. The world width is 334. Okay, so it's something weird's happening here. Yeah, it's good. It's great, and there's loads of really great material about using it. This guy Dan Schiffman, who's a massive inspiration for doing these streams, actually does what I think is the best introduction to programming that currently exists. Is his YouTube playlist on processing and P5, because it's all everything he teaches is very directly applicable to interactive stuff. It's always in the context of something real. You know, a lot of people when they learn to program, they don't know what they want to use these loops and conditions and stuff for, but his examples are like really well put together. Like the way he presents it is very chaotic, but I think it's actually very, very well planned out behind the scenes. So I think I'm spawning them in weird places. So when I respawn, what is happening? Let me... Okay, they are moving, it's just kind of slow. So I think I just need to let them get up to speed. Okay. It kind of looks like the stars are just like it kind of looks like the stars are rotating, right? Like as the night progresses, which is not entirely what I intended this to be. But okay, this works. So if I do this and we let the wind change, then we should probably see. Yeah. Do you remember CTF Face from Unreal Tournament? That's kind of what this reminds me of. Oh, you know what's also wrong is that the velocity should reset to 0. Okay, yeah, this isn't the nicest wind visualization, but hopefully it gives some idea. Actually, this is actually just really confusing. Oh well. I didn't nail it again, did I? No, it's gone off screen. Yeah, the wind is kind of screwy right now, but because it takes some time for it to like change direction, and then you kind of lose the whole point of it being feedback. Hey, pretty good shot again. Okay. You know what? I think this is a good point to pause. I feel like we have the basic core gameplay pretty much all in here already. There's more stuff we could add. We could add more projectiles. We could add that little tracker when the thing goes off the screen, which would be kind of neat. Like a little arrow thing or something. We could add some scorekeeping and health display and stuff like that, but I think this is probably a pretty good place, since it's pretty much playable now, to stop. I think what I'll do is so every week we do a poll on our Twitter for which subject to do. I think I'll throw this back on the poll next week, so if people want us to continue doing this, they can vote for that. Otherwise, you know, they can vote for something new. It's kind of fun playing around with it. It kind of feels like the real thing. If you're interested in looking at the code, we have a GitHub or rather I have a GitHub where I put this stuff. So there's a repo here which I will link to with all of the code, and then over the weekend at some point I will add this in here. You can see all of our previous streams in here. There is a lot of stuff. There's the link. If you want to check our Twitter and maybe vote on the next one, or just generally follow what we're doing with these streams or with our main game, which is called Steamhounds, which is this turn-based tactical steampunk RPG dealy, which is pretty cool if I do say so myself. Then there's that. We also have a Discord where, yeah, you can kind of get on board with the playtest for Steamhounds, or just generally chat to us on there. It's a good place to suggest new topics for streams and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess thanks so much everyone for tuning in. I think we made something pretty cool today in about 2.5 hours. Do I always use processing? If I can, then yes. If it's suitable for processing, I use it. There are other things where I've used P5.js, which is the JavaScript version. I've also used Unity. And then in my professional game dev, I use Unreal as well. So pretty much whatever tool is fit for the job. But for little projects like this, processing is definitely my go-to deal. Yeah. So I think I'll say goodbye, and I will catch you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Yeah. Dan Schiffman is a massive, massive inspiration. He's the OG. So if we can recreate some of that feeling with these streams, then I'm super happy to do that. Yeah, and I'm glad that you found us in there. Okay, for real this time. Goodbye, everyone. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.